I like my martini shaken, not stirred. But this is iced tea. I've also got a Reese's peanut butter cup.
You're watching So Awkward. This is Freddy Krueger saying hi.
Hey, welcome to So Awkward. It's me, Don, and I just saw Spectre. I'm super excited to see it. Just got home from the theater. I'm not in my car because I walked to the theater. I saw it at the Lagoon Theater in uptown Minneapolis, Minnesota, a couple blocks from my apartment. It's late at night. I'm tired. I want to go to bed. I never see movies at night because I'm an old man and I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning for work and such. But I was so excited to see the new Bond film. I couldn't wait. It's Thursday night. I saw it at 7 o'clock, as I said, which isn't even late, probably for most people, but for me, I was afraid I'd fall asleep. But I didn't fall asleep because it was great. I loved it. Long story short, best Daniel Craig Bond film? Maybe. It's probably not quite as good as Casino Royale. I don't know if anything could top that just in terms of nostalgia and anticipation for the character to come back. The whole rebooting of the whole franchise, the introduction of Daniel Craig and him being phenomenal. Nothing could quite top Casino Royale, but this is just a straight up fantastic James Bond film. Way better than Skyfall, which I didn't love. Way better than Quantum of Solace, which I did love. But this was a really good, classic feeling James Bond movie. I give it a thumbs up. This is going to be a completely spoiler-free review. Maybe I'll do another video later, tomorrow, after I've had time to sleep on it, and discuss some spoiler things. Because there's a lot going on in this movie. There's a lot to talk about. I just wanted to give a quick review. Just to give my thumbs up and to talk about it. But again, no spoilers. I'll try. Sam Mendes is back as director, and I wasn't a huge fan of Skyfall, which I've said many times, or Sam Mendes films in general. I find him to make beautiful but boring movies, like Skyfall, like American Beauty. People love that movie. I thought it was not that good. Or what was that one? Road to Perdition. Gorgeous movie, just the most boring thing I've ever seen. So I wasn't that excited when I heard that he was coming back, but obviously they brought him back because Skyfall was the most successful Bond film of all time. I thought Skyfall was probably one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. Certainly the most beautiful James Bond film. Every image, every scene looked like a painting. Just the cinematography was incredible, the sets, but it had no story to care about. The characters felt hollow. Everything just felt in service of the visuals in that film to me. I mean, it's not a terrible movie, it's an entertaining movie, but just like the scene where Javier Bardem makes his introduction and he's giving that monologue and he's walking really slowly towards the camera, it's all in one take. Just that scene sums up the whole movie for me, where it just felt so choreographed and so set up, where they must have been like, okay, you're going to take 87 steps and you need to say this monologue at this particular cadence in order for the timing to be perfect. Just the whole movie felt like that. Spectre is also very beautiful and visually arresting, but it also felt more organic and as though the actors had more to do and more room to breathe. It didn't feel so choreographed. So I think Sam Mendes, he seemed to, it had more of a story, first of all, and his direction seemed in service of the story more than just of making the film look beautiful. So I think Sam Mendes did a really good job. It was a well-directed film. It was exciting. It was a classic James Bond. Is what all I'll say about that. This felt reverential of the series as a whole, whereas sometimes Bond films seem kind of mock the genre and the character. This one just felt like a love letter to the series and to the fans and to James Bond as a whole. I think there were a lot of homages to earlier films, which some of them I won't get into because it could be spoiler territory, but just little things like we see Bond in the white tuxedo again with the red rose. There's a scene where Bond goes to a clinic in the Swiss Alps, which I believe was an homage to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Just little things like that. Or there was a fight scene on a train that was very similar to the fight scene with Red Grant in From Russia with Love. I might be reading too much into this, but I think that the film was structured in a way that they were little, homages. More, I'm not going to call them Easter eggs because they were pretty obvious, and it felt cool. Daniel Craig, of course, is back as Bond. His fourth, so I think it's fair to say that he's a great James Bond, certainly one of the best. I'm not going to say the best. He has the potential. If he makes 7, which he probably won't, but if he makes 7, I would crown him as the best. But at 4, you have to give the nod to Connery. I also really love Roger Moore. On an emotional level, I prefer Roger Moore. But on a technical level, in terms of acting, the films he's been in, the presence he has, the approach he takes to the character, Daniel Craig just knocks it out of the park. He's phenomenal. He's a great actor, and he's just so believable as this character. And maybe the truest to the character as written by Ian Fleming in those terrible James Bond novels. Am I allowed to say that? I'm a huge Bond fan. Nobody's a bigger Bond fan than me. But I don't like the books because they're not very well written. And then we have I don't know the name of the actress who played the Bond girl. Madeline Swan, I believe was her name. She was very good, very interesting. She brought a lot to the character. It wasn't just your typical Bond girl. She had like a strength to her, but not like in a cliched way. She was just, I liked her a lot. I liked her performance. I liked the character, and she was very beautiful, obviously. I enjoyed their chemistry together. Although I imagine that some people might disagree with that. We'll see. Bond fans, they're always critical of the Bond girls. That's one thing. Because the Bond series gets a bad rap as being misogynistic. It's really not. James Bond loves women. But I do think that there's a certain subsection of Bond fans that are misogynistic. So they say horrible things about the actresses who play the Bond girls. In fact, they're even referred to as Bond girls, which I guess is kind of misogynistic. But it's, no harm meant. Bond women. The female actresses in the Bond films, I'll refer to them as. And then Batista is in there. I was really excited to see Batista. I'm a huge fan of him as a wrestler, and I think he's been doing a great job in his new acting career. There was not enough Batista in this movie. I will say that. That's my main criticism of the movie. It needed more Batista. When he was on screen, he stole the movie, as he has done in every movie he's ever been in. He always comes on and he steals the movie because he's that good. And his presence is just that commanding. He's huge, first of all, but it's even more than that. He's just incredibly charismatic. And in this film, he was great. Even though he didn't speak. I think he had one line. I don't know if that's a spoiler. It's just a quirk of his character. His introduction was amazing. Like the scene where you'll know it when you see it, because as soon as you see Batista come on screen, get ready because it's phenomenal. It's so good. And then he has a fight scene with Bond later on, and it's as good a fight scene as I've ever seen in any Bond film. It might be the best Bond fight scene, at least in recent memory. It goes on for a while. It's really well choreographed, and just Batista just kicks the crap out of him. It's great. It's a lot of fun. One of the reasons why Batista, I think, is having such a great acting career is that he's taking supporting roles in really good movies instead of being like your John Cena's or your Stone Cold Steve Austin's or whomever who takes starring roles in terrible movies. He's not doing that. He's taking the craft of acting seriously, as he probably took wrestling, where you can't be in the main event at WrestleMania your first time out. You have to pay your dues and work the independent circuit and work your way up to WrestleMania. I'm going off on a tangent here, but the first time I saw him acting was in The Man with the Golden Arms, I think was the name of that movie. The Man with the Golden Fists, the RZA directed kung fu movie, which is underrated. It's not great, but it's underrated. And Batista was the best thing in it as one of the villains. And then he's probably did some other stuff here and there, but his biggest role was in Guardians of the Galaxy as Drax the Destroyer. But again, it's an ensemble piece where he was just a really small but pivotal supporting role. And so I really respect that about Batista. He had the fame and power to probably be a leading man, but he probably saw 12 Rounds and The Marine and The Condemned. It was like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. I want to make good movies. So I'm going to work with good directors and take interesting roles in big, high-profile, prestige films. And it's paying off because he's great. And of course, there's a long tradition, sort of professional wrestlers beating up James Bond in James Bond movies. Most famous, I guess, would be Harold Sakata, who played Oddjob in Goldfinger. Milton Reed, I think was his name. He was in Dr. No. He's the big guy at the end who's like, Bond's turning that valve on like that nuclear reactor, and then they fight, and then he throws him into the whatever. I don't know anything about nuclear reactors. I never know what's going on at the end of Dr. No. I just know this is a big fight scene. And he also is in The Spy Who Loved Me. He has a fight scene with Bond, like on a rooftop. And then there's Peter Maivia, who has a fight scene with Sean Connery in You Only Live Twice. Peter Maivia, of course, is a legendary wrestler, one of the all-time greats, but most famous for being the grandfather of The Rock. And then Pat Roach, another professional wrestler, beats up Sean Connery in Never Say Never Again, which is an underrated film. I like that one. He's the guy, he fights Bond in the clinic, and then Bond beats him because he throws his urine specimen in his face. You guys, in context, it makes sense. Sort of. Excuse me. Then, of course, there's the villain played by Christoph Waltz. His name's, I want to call him Daniel Oberhauser, but that's a guy I know. So it's something Oberhauser. And I won't say too much about his character, but he wears a Nehru jacket, and he strokes a white cat. And he's the head of a group called Spectre. He's a classic Bond villain. The best Bond villain we've had in a decade. I can't remember the last time we had a great Bond villain. We've had some pretty good Bond villains. I liked Mads Mikkelsen, or whatever his name is, as Le Chiffre in Casino Royale. He was pretty good, but he felt like more of a henchman than a true villain. Javier Bardem had potential, but his character was just so cliched and poorly written. Like, we already saw that character better done as the Joker in The Dark Knight. Mateo Almeric, I don't remember the name of his character in Quantum of Solace. Great actor, gave a great performance, not the best villain. I love that movie, but even I'll admit that as a villain, it fell short. Sean Bean was great as the villain in GoldenEye. I don't remember any of the other villains in any of the other Pierce Brosnan movies. Jonathan Pryce was okay as Carver, but not great. Anyway, this is a return to form for your scene-chewing Bond villain. He was great. I don't know, he was really good and really fun to watch and really creepy. Like, he nailed the creepiness of the character as the head of Spectre. Should be creepy and scary. And then we've got the rest of the returning characters. Rory Kinnear as Bill Tanner, the unsung hero of the Daniel Craig era, at least of Bond films. Bill Tanner has shown up here and there in earlier Bond films, but he's never been played by the same actor twice. Maybe Michael Kitchen played him twice. I can't remember. But he may have. But Rory Kinnear has played him now 4 times, at least. And he doesn't have as much to do in this as he did in Quantum of Solace. If you really like Bill Tanner, see Quantum of Solace. That's that's the most Tanner-rific of the Bond films. But I like the actor, and I like the character of Bill Tanner as a Bond fan, and it's always fun to see him come back. I'm just getting used to this new Q, this young guy. I don't remember the actor's name, I apologize. But I was skeptical about him in Skyfall. But he had a little too much of that hipster attitude in Skyfall. So they tried to make him like as much unlike Desmond Llewellyn's original Q as they could. Whereas in this one, he feels like an actual authentic character. Like he's given more to do, and he's actually kind of likable. I think the actor did a really good job, and they wrote his character a lot better. They gave him more depth, I would say. Naomi Harris is back as Moneypenny. I still don't really understand her character. I think it's great that they're not just having Moneypenny as the love-struck secretary who flirts with Bond for 5 minutes and then she's gone. But I still don't really understand the role that this character plays in MI6. Is she a secretary? Is she a field operative? I think Naomi Harris is a great actress. I think once they figure out what to do with this character, she'll nail it. But she doesn't have, I don't know. I thought if you're a Naomi Harris fan, she had more to do in Skyfall. Ralph Fiennes returns as M, and he's pretty great. I miss Judi Dench, which I didn't know if I'd ever say that. I spent the Judi Dench era missing Bernard Lee and Robert Brown, kind of. So Judi Dench was just, I never embraced her as M as much as I would have if I wasn't a huge fan going in already of the Bernard Lee era. But now that Ralph Fiennes is there, I find myself not embracing him as much because he's not Judi Dench. Yeah, what's that? Don't it always seem to be you don't know what you got till it's gone? Pave Paradise. Have Judi Dench as M. Is that what are the words to that song? Bernard Lee and Robert Brown used to be the guy, like Bond would go into his office at the beginning of the movie. They'd say, "Here's your assignment, Bond," and then you'd never see him again. Maybe at the end, like he'd smoke a pipe and be like, "What's Bond up to now? How did he?" Like they'd have the wrap up with him. Whereas when you pay big money for Judi Dench, you pay probably even bigger money for Ralph Fiennes. You got to use them. You got to put them in your movie. So they always have bigger roles. And Ralph Fiennes does a lot in this movie. He's got a pretty substantial role. And I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. Anytime you give more to another character, there's less Bond. So on the one hand, that's, not great. But, I mean, it's Ralph Fiennes. He's a phenomenal actor. He's as good as any actor out there today. Just like Judi Dench is as good, if not the best actress out there today. It's not the strongest story of any Bond film I've ever seen. It's confusing and kind of lacking in emotional something. I also never really understood what was going on. Like, Christoph Waltz, the villain's main plot was just so thinly written that it was kind of, you never really got a sense of what Bond was fighting him for. It felt like a kind of a personal vendetta more than trying to save the world. I like when Bond saved the world. I don't always like when he's on these personal vendettas for whatever reason. But the movie was so good that didn't really matter. And Bond films as a whole are kind of like that. You watch the Bond movie, whichever one it is, and you love it and you're so entertained, but at the end you're like, yeah, wait, why did that guy do that thing? Like, what was the point of that? What was that program that he used, and who was that guy there? But you don't care because they're so good and they're so well done that it's all smoke and mirrors. The stories don't necessarily matter. Like, if you were to analyze the story of Goldfinger, it's the dumbest movie ever made, but it's also my favorite Bond film. So I'm not going to knock Spectre because the story wasn't that enthralling or emotionally gripping, because the characters were so great and they were given so much fun things to do. The movie was just entertaining. Like, every Bond film has the opening segment, which is usually just an amazing action set piece. Sometimes it sets up the plot. Usually it didn't used to, but lately it does. And this one is amazing. Like, I'm not going to say it's the best opening for any Bond film. I actually made a video where I ranked all of the Bond openings, and I don't think I posted it because it was kind of boring, or I had other things to post. But I would put this one pretty high on the list. Like, it opens in Mexico City. Like, the first 10 minutes or so is one long tracking shot, like unbroken tracking shot, where the camera comes down on a crane on this parade. It finds Bond in the crowd, and he's dressed as a skeleton. I think it's going to go down as one of the iconic images from the film and one of the iconic looks of Bond. Like, once you see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. He looks awesome. And then the camera follows him as he goes inside this hotel, up an elevator, into a hotel room, out a window, walking along this ledge to another building, and it's all one shot. I'm sure there's some places where it looks like they could have inserted some digital edits, to make it look like one shot. It probably wasn't all one shot. But if it was, it's the most amazing tracking shot in the history of film. And even if there were like digital hidden cuts in there, it's still phenomenal. It's really cool. And then from there, there's this amazing helicopter sequence, which is, if you see it on IMAX, I didn't see it on IMAX, but I just saw it like on a normal theater, and if you get motion sickness, it's the most terrifying aerial sequence I've seen, and I can remember. I don't know. It's frightening. I'm afraid of heights, but this was like a helicopter just spinning around. I mean, it's phenomenal. It was incredible. It was one of the best opening sequences to any Bond film. It really just set the pace of the film. It moved at a faster clip than Skyfall. But anyway, I give it 2 thumbs up. Will it go down as one of the best Bond films ever? I don't know. Probably. I think so. I thought it was great. As a Bond fan, I loved it. As a film fan, I think it's going to be a hit. It is a continuation of the other Daniel Craig Bond films. Definitely. There's a lot of references to the previous films. And I'm not talking about homages. I'm talking about like direct references, plot-wise. So you'll get a lot more out of it if you've seen the previous films. But it was so good and just so exciting that I think people who've never seen a Bond film will also really respond to it and really enjoy it. Maybe just for Christoph Waltz's his performance as the villain, that guy's just always great. He's always fun. And Daniel Craig is great. No, everybody likes Daniel Craig. At first, remember there was that website before Casino Royale came out talking about how Daniel Craig is the worst Bond ever. Like, I don't remember the link to the website. But I bet whoever started that website feels pretty stupid these days, because Daniel Craig is the real deal. He's, I hope he makes more. I mean, there's all these rumors where they're looking at other people like Idris Elba or Tom Hardy or all these other people. And Daniel Craig gave that interview where he talked about how he would rather slit his own wrists than make another Bond movie. But I'm hoping he'll come back. Basically, this is probably going to be like a 20-minute review when all I really needed to say was it was great. If you love James Bond, you'll love this movie. If you're new to the series, give it a try, because this is a really fun, exciting, great movie. I loved it. So for the ladies out there, if you want to see Daniel Craig shirtless, go rent Casino Royale or Quantum of Solace or probably Skyfall. Was he shirtless in that? I think so. I think he had like a shower scene. Anyway, enough about how sexy Daniel Craig is.